Hi, this is Bill Raymond, and welcome to this last video in my Working with Jekyll Data video series. In this one, we're going to talk about creating our own custom data. Let's get started. As you'll recall from the previous video, we set up a basic Jekyll site with the Minima theme, and we created this Jekyll data.html file. And so that's where we're at right now, and we're looking at Jekyll data. If you are jumping right into this and you want to find out how I set all of this up, please go back to the part 2 video in this series and you can get yourself set up so that you can begin working with custom data. So I have the Jekyll-data.html file here. I'm going to create a new one called custom data.html, and we're going to do the same thing. Create the 3 dashes at the top twice. That tells Jekyll to start building, and I'm going to do an HTML:5. This just gives us some basic scaffolding for our HTML page, and I'll type H1 tab, and we're just going to say using custom data Jekyll custom data. There we go. And I'll save that. And what I want to do now is just go to the URL custom-data.html. Now what I'll do is just type the word test to make sure that when I save the file, I see that here. It is automatically rebuilding, which is great. That's all I wanted to test for there. And we can go ahead and get started. When you create data in Jekyll, it's essentially static data, but every time you update the file, it'll automatically get rebuilt by Jekyll. And if you're using a site like GitHub Pages or any other site that hosts Jekyll, that'll automatically get rebuilt as well, and your site can start using that data. In this video, I'm going to pretend like we're creating a database that stores essentially all the URLs for our website. This way we can create our own custom menu navigation. Now we're not going to actually create the navigation here. Really what I'm going to do is show you how to set up the files and use the files. In order to create our fictitious navigation menu file, we need to add that to our site. Make sure you're at the root of the site and create a new folder called _data. This is a special data folder that Jekyll is aware of, and it knows that there could be data files stored inside of it. We're going to add one now. Create a new file, and I'm going to call this navs.csv. And CSV, of course, stands for comma-separated variable, and so it makes sense that there is information in the file separated by commas. So here's name, comma, title. Sorry, let me try that again. Title, comma, URL. And then I'll just type home, comma, /index.html and about. And there is going to be an about.html page that we want to display in our fictitious navigation menu. So you can see the title and the URL. The descriptor for your data always needs to be on the first row. The second and third row and any other further rows are always going to be treated as the data that you want to display. So if you are taking data and just typing it the way I am, that's cool. But just be aware that let's say you're bringing in a CSV file from some external source, Microsoft Excel, Google Docs, whatever. That might save the data with double quotes or single quotes. So you're going to have to be aware of that, and make sure you save the data and look at Jekyll when it's rebuilding just to be sure you don't see any yellow or red error messages. If you see yellow or red error messages, it's probably because of the formatting of the file. It can be a little bit, here's a word, persnickety. It can be a little bit difficult sometimes to figure out what's wrong in the file, especially if you have lots of data, like a big product list or something like that. So just do make sure that the data is accurate. Now we can work with this data. So I'm just going to go ahead and lower this Explorer here so we have more ways to look at our code. more space to look at our code. And I'm going to go ahead and type h2, and I'm going to say CSV file. And next, I'm going to do a for loop. I'm going to say for nav in site.data.navs. There we go. And what I'm doing is I'm saying, look at the root site, go to the data folder, and then in there get the navs file. Now be aware that we're not typing navs, we're not over here typing navs.csv, we're typing just navs, because this is the object that it sees. Jekyll sees navs as an object, not the .csv extension. So just be aware of that. And so now I'm just going to type a paragraph mark, if I can. Let's see if you've been watching these videos, I've been having a hard time creating paragraph marks. Okay, and I'm just going to type title, and then I'm going to do my double squiggly marks and type nav.title and save. And now we can see the home and the about from our CSV file are listed. So that's home and about. Next, inside of our CSV file, we still have the URL, which is /index and /about. So let's go ahead and get that as well. I'll just do a little dash here and my double squigglies again and do nav.url and save. There, we can see the two data elements associated with that in the CSV file. Now we're going to move on to a TSV file. So once again, I'm going to go to the data folder and create a new file. And this time I'm going to call it navs.tsv for tab separated variable. Now I want you to pay attention over here on the browser when I press enter. As you can see, the CSV file kind of disappeared. What happened to our data? Well, if you'll recall, when I came over here and I was writing this for nav and site.data.navs loop here, you can see, remember I said that this is not looking at navs.csv, it's looking at the word navs as an object. And now there's two navs in this folder. So really what we're going to need to do in order to work with this navs.csv file is give it its own unique name. I said TSV, so I'll type navs-tsv.tsv. And watch over here on the right, when I press enter, you'll see that our CSV data comes back. That's because we have a unique name now. Okay, so the next thing that I want to do is create the title and tab and the URL. Now here's a problem that you're going to run into with most code editors. Tabs, those actually do what looks like a tab, but if I backspace, notice that everything's just a space. There are no actual tabs in this file. So how do I insert a tab? Well, you know what? I went on to Google and I searched and searched for how to insert a tab in a file, and maybe there's a super easy way to do that, but I haven't been able to figure it out. I think the word tab just gets used too much in Visual Studio Code searches. So if you have any ideas, let me know in the comments. I think I'd love to know, and I'm sure other people would like to know as well. But here's my trick. I go to Microsoft Word, I press the tab key, and then I select it and copy it. Now, when I come in here to separate title and URL, I paste the tab in, and now you can see it's exactly what I want. So if I paste that in a few times and I press backspace, now you can see that it is actually using the tabs. Okay, cool. So now I'll come in here and type the same thing again. So home, paste in the tab, and do /index.html, and I'll do about and /about.html. I'll go ahead and save that. And now we'll come back over here to our data file, and to our custom data.html file. I'm just gonna copy this, say this is TSV, and now it's gonna say for nav in site, and then that's navs-tsv. And again, you don't use the full file name, and go ahead and save. And now you can see we have the same data here. But what's wrong? What's happening here? How come how come this about.html is to the left of the dash here? Well, that's because if I come over here, I can look, I press the tab key on the second line, on the third line there. So I actually need to paste that in. And this time when I paste it, watch what happens over here on the right. You can see there, now it's two different files, two different data elements. So just be cautious when you're working with a tab separated variable that you think you're typing tab, but you may not actually be inserting a tab. Now we're going to move away from these sort of old school data formats to the more modern data formats. One of them being JSON. If you're not familiar with JSON, it's essentially a markup language that allows you to define data in a fairly robust way. It does take a little bit of time to get used to it. I'm going to create a new file here and call this navs-json.json. And now we have our blank file. Unlike comma-separated variables where we just have the title at the top of the page and then everything is underneath, this is almost like constructing a little database inside of code. So you can even have one-to-many relationships with information in here. And I'm going to touch on that at the end of this video, the concept of one-to-many relationships. However, in this particular area, we're just going to do something really simple. So first of all, what we want to do is create opening and closing squiggly brackets. And this is what I like to do. You don't have to do this, but I create this little tag at the top. You can call it whatever you want. And this says attribute, and I'm just going to say main navigation items. The purpose of this attribute is to you can't actually do comments in JSON. So this is a way to do comments, to kind of create a data field that you're just not necessarily going to use. And then do a comma. And then here, I'm going to type items. And then I'm going to do square brackets. And inside the square brackets, we're going to add our two URLs. So once again, squiggly brackets. And then here we'll do title, colon, and then we'll type home. And I'll type comma. And this time I'll type URL and /index.html. Now, because I have two of these items, you can see I'm in this bracket set right here underneath the word items. So I need to create another one, but I have to do a comma here to inform JSON that there's yet another data element. So once again, squiggly brackets, and we're going to do title once again. And this time we'll do about, and then a URL. Oops, URL. Let's see, why is that working? No, I have to do a comma here. And there we go. Now I can do URL /about.html and save that. Okay, so this is a well-formed JSON file. Once again, look for any errors that might be in yellow or red in the terminal window just to make sure you're doing it right. Okay, so this is essentially a file that displays all of our two navigation items. Notice that this time I'm working with this items here instead of just title and URL. So there's going to be a little bit extra code that I do, but in my mind, actually, this is a good thing because I'll explain why in just a little bit here. But I like to just call everything items. That way, anytime I access any of my data files, I can always just do a for item in items. And then I know that all of my data files just use this items thing. So anyway, let's go ahead and move on. And this time we're going to create a JSON version. So I'll just go ahead and copy this and say JSON file. And now instead of site.data.navs-tsv, what I'm going to do is just say navs-json. And I'll go ahead and save that. Now, notice that the data is not displaying here. Why is that? Well, if you recall, I mentioned this items here. That's what we need. We need to get the items into our code. So instead of just site.data.navs-json, we're going to do .items. And now when I save the code, you can see we have the home and the about. So just be aware, now we're actually working with sort of more of a database. So think of this way. Think of this attribute as a table in a database, and think of this items as a table in the database, and this table has 2 rows in it. And that will help you kind of think about how you're going to format this for loop. Now, the last data type that we're going to work with is called YAML. And as I mentioned before, YAML is used throughout Jekyll. So I'll just close this JSON file down, and we can take a look here. Remember, we have our config.yaml file, and I talked about this in the previous video, that you can go in and create your own data elements or use the ones that Jekyll provides out of the box. And if you add your own data elements, then you can just call those in any page that you want. But remember, if you change something or create something, you're going to have to stop Jekyll and restart it. If you recall in the previous video, this just had the Jekyll RB Twitter username, and I renamed that to mine. I had to stop Jekyll and start it again. So that's not a good developer flow. A better developer flow is to create your own YAML file that's not the config.yaml file that will display the information that you want. You'll get the same functionality, except you won't have to deal with having to stop and start Jekyll, which is exactly what you want. So we'll go to the data folder again, and we're going to create a new file. And guess what we're going to call it? It's navs-yaml.yaml, where the A is silent, so YML. And I'll press enter. There. Now, one of the nice things about YAML, while it can start to look a little bit confusing when you really get advanced with it, one of the nice things about it is that it is really easy to kind of type up your markup. So I'll just type items, and then underneath that I'll do dash title :home, and then underneath the title we're going to say URL :/index.html, and then we have another title, and this is about, and that URL is /about.html. So you can see this is pretty straightforward. I still get a little bit confused with where to use the dashes and where not to use the dashes. But here's the rule of thumb. Items is a configuration item that we're going to use, or a data element we're going to use. And then item contains 2 different items, which are 2 different titles. And that title has a URL. So this dash title is saying, hey, there's 2 of us. There's 2 different things here with the same name. So if that helps, I'm not sure if I'm explaining that the best. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and save that. And we'll come over here to custom data one more time. And I'm going to copy and paste this JSON one and call this YAML. And now we have for nav insight.data.navs-YML. And we're still doing .items because remember we have items up here. So that's kind of our main structure. So once I do that, that should just work. There we go. So there's our YAML file, and we're getting the same data out of there. Okay, so that's it for the 4 data types. Now what I'm going to do is start showing you a few more advanced tips and tricks, such as how to use one-to-many relationships in your data files. To do a one-to-many relationship, you really can only do that. You could do it in a CSV file or a TSV file. However, you'll find that it's much easier to do in JSON or YAML because they're kind of designed for that, where a CSV and a TSV is more of a flat file. JSON and YAML are designed to allow for nesting of data. So I'm going to create a new file in the data folder, and that's going to be called navs-yml-1-2-many.yaml. I'm creating a pretty obvious file name here. I'll just let you see it. So this is navs-yml-1-to-many.yml. Okay, so I'm actually just going to copy the code from our other YAML file and put it into our one-to-many. So here's our strategy. We are creating a navigation menu with this YML file, but some of our navigation items, like this about, might have a contact us page underneath it, a sub menu item, and it might also have another one that says, let's say, to click to find a map to get to your business. So let's go ahead and do that right now. So what we're going to do is underneath this about, we're going to come underneath it here and type sub items and colon. This creates a whole new item. So it's kind of like here's items and now here are sub items. And then underneath that, we have a title. So we do dash title and colon. And here we're just going to type contact us. And then the URL. So kind of laying this out the same way. And underneath that, we have /contact.html. And then finally, we have one more. Oh, I apologize. No dash there. So same structure. We have a sub item with a dash title and no dash after the URL. And one more time, we'll do title and we'll do map. And the URL is /map.html. Again, if I can type, there. And I can save this. Now, you're not going to notice there's no errors here, but there is one slight problem, and that is that I have sub-items underneath title, but in this about page, but no sub-items underneath the home page. And this is valid YAML and it will work. However, I suggest that you keep the structure the same no matter where you go. So even though we won't have any sub-items underneath the home, what I'm going to do is two sub-items, colon, and then two solid brackets. That way we have the same structure, but the two solid brackets are saying basically that there's nothing in that array. So that's all good. So even though not needed, I like to put that there. All right, now what we're going to do is go to H2 heading, and we'll say YAML file 1-to-many. All right, cool. Now this is going to be slightly different than all the other things that we've been working on so far, because we have to not only get the titles, but we have to get the subtitles or the sub items. So here we go. We're going to do a for loop, and in that for loop, we're going to start off pretty much the same as we have in the past, where we say for oops, don't click that, nav in site.data.navs-yaml -1-to-many, and then again .items, and save that. All right, so that seems to be working. So the next thing we're going to do is do our our paragraph mark that I always have a problem creating, and strong, and inside there we'll just say title, and then inside this p tag here we'll also just do our standard nav.title with our dash and our nav.url, and save that. So this is good. So far we're getting the list of items just as we did with the other YAML file. But you know, Jekyll doesn't really understand this one-to-many relationship unless we build it. So the next thing that we're going to do is go after this. We're going to stay in the for loop that we just created, but now we're going to say if the nav has sub items, and in there we're going to put some more code. And so we're going to say, if sub-items exist, then do something. So it's going to skip over the home and go right to about because home has nothing. So if nav has sub-items, then we're going to say for sub-item in nav.subitems. So we're creating a new variable called sub-item that's going to be a collection of all the sub-items in this nav right here. All right. So the next thing we'll do is do our p tag, our strong tag, and I'm going to do something just a little bit unique here and type ampersand NBSP semicolon. What that does is it creates a non-breaking space, and I'm going to do that twice. The reason for why I'm doing that is because I just want to indent the text a little bit. So this is the equivalent of typing 2 spaces at the beginning of the text. So then I'll just do sub-item title, and we'll just create a new line rather than doing this on one line so we can see everything. And now I'll do my double brackets, and I'll say show the sub-item dot title, and then do our dash and sub-item.url. Let's see how that looks. There we go. Now we have our sub-item title and our contact us. So that's cool. You know, the one thing I can do, of course, is just bring this paragraph mark over here. And there. Now it's all showing very nicely. So you can see that non-breaking space just indented that a little bit so we could see it. So that's basically how we create a one-to-many relationship, and we can also do that in a JSON file. I'm going to expand the Explorer area here, and I'm going to copy the navs-json file, and I'm going to rename that to navs-json-1-2-many. So we're going to kind of do the same thing that we just did with the YAML file. Okay, so I'll just bring this back down. And here we have our JSON file. We're going to kind of do the similar thing that we did with YAML, but this time we're going to do this inside of the JSON file. So here we have our about menu item, and we're going to have some sub items. So what I want to do is go to after the URL, type a comma, and now I'm going to type sub items in double quotes and colon, and whenever we're opening up a new record, if you will, I create the square brackets, and then inside of there we have a new record underneath that, and that's going to be our data. So here we've got title again, and we're going to type contact us, comma, URL, and then in quotes we also have /contact.html. So that's one of the records. We're going to do a comma after this little squiggly bracket and create one more. And here we're going to add another title of map and comma. The URL is /map.html, and save that. Okay, so just like the YAML file, it's a good practice to make sure you have sub-items in every item. So even though we don't have any here in the home, I'm just going to do a comma and type sub-items in here with a colon and just opening and closing square brackets. So now it exists in both. So we don't actually have to test and see if there are sub-items and things like that in the future. I'm just going to go ahead and save that, and we'll come over here. The nice thing about our code that we created for this YAML file, it's the same thing with JSON. So I'm just going to copy this code down here, rename our heading to JSON, and I'm also just going to change the data. So site.data-navs-json, and save that. And now we're reading from the JSON file. So you can see all the code is still the same. We're just saying hey, instead of go to the YAML file, go to the JSON file, you can work with that same way. For the remainder of this video, I'm just going to work with a YAML file. I think you can figure out how to do this in JSON or CSV or TSV moving forward. All right, so I'm just going to open up the navs.yaml, sorry, the navs YAML one-to-many file, and I'm going to copy that and paste it. And this one is going to be sort order. So we can talk about how we might sort our menu item. And in here, what we're going to do with our new sort order file, let me close the rest of this down. There we go. And I'm just going to come over here and say, I always want home to display first. So I could actually come in here and create a value called sort order. And of course, I'm just calling it sort order. You could call it whatever you'd like. Actually, you know what? Just to keep things a little bit smaller for the screen, I'm just going to call it SO for sort order. And I'm going to say that's 1. And then I'm also going to come down here and create a brand new menu item. And I'm going to call that one products. And the URL is going to be /products.html. And there I'm going to create a sort order of 2. And finally, the about page will have a sort order of 3. So in other words, I could actually take products and move that above about, and the navigation will display properly. But if you're sitting here coding, you're not trying to move, you're moving things around, you're testing. Sometimes you don't have things in the order that you want. And sometimes you don't want to rely on Jekyll just sorting things based on how it sees the world. So you could actually create this sort order. So what we have is the home page is supposed to display first, the products page is supposed to display second, and then the about page is supposed to display third. Now, we don't have any sort orders on sub-items, but we're going to get to that in just a minute. So let's go ahead and go to custom data, and I'm going to take this YAML file one-to-many code that we created earlier and paste that down here. And I'm just going to call this, let's see, we'll just call this sort order. And save that. And now we have the for loop where we're navigating through the data file. But what I really want to do here is use the assign function. And here I'm going to say navs equal site.data.navs YAML sort order. And then we're going to say for nav in navs. I'm just going to make sure that works. Okay, so that's the problem. I didn't do dot items. There we go. All right, so now we're getting the list of items from the new YAML file that we created. Notice that we have home and about, and then products is down at the down below. Well, the reason for why we created this variable, this assign just created the variable of navs, and so what we can do now is just, I'll put this on a new line, and I'll do a pipe, which is that shift / on most keyboards, and I'll do sort : and then in double quotes I'll type SO. Now when I save this, what should happen is products, which is down below here on the bottom right, it should go below the word home and above the word about. So let's save the file, and there it is. Now products is moved. But you'll notice that the sub-items still are in their same order. What if we want to put the map before contact us? So we can come over here and we can change this so that the sort order for contact us is 2 and the sort order for map is 1. I'm going to save the file, and by now we should see map above contact us, right? No, how come that's not happening? Let's look at our custom data, and you'll see that because we're creating a whole new for loop that looks at the sub items, we don't have a variable that's sorting the sort order for the sub items. So we do is come in here and assign sub items equals nav dot sub items. And then we'll say for sub item in sub items. There we go. So we're creating a new variable called sub items, and then we're going to loop through that. And I'll just save this. Nothing should change right now. But now at the assign level, we can go sort :so just like we did before. So now we should see map down here at the bottom right move above contact us. I'm going to save. There's map above contact us. This is going to be the last part of the video, and I'm going to show you how to hide menu items. So let's say, for example, that we have a new sale page that we're going to create, but the sale isn't going to be announced until next week. So I don't want that to show up in my menu item quite yet. So what I'm going to do is come over here to our data folder. I'm going to copy this sort order YAML file, and I'm going to use that copy and change it from sort order to display item. There. Now, under display item, what we're going to do is create this new menu item called sale with the URL of /sale.html. And what I want this to do is display between the home page and the products page. Remember, home has a sort order of 1 and products has a sort order of 2. So what I'm going to do is just place the sort order as 1.5 and save that. Now nothing's happening over here yet because we haven't created something to display it. So let's just take this sort order code that we already wrote and copy that, and then we'll just call this display or hide menu items, or just say items. Save that, and now we have the title, but we need to connect to the right data source. So we'll change that from sort order to display item. And now we're connected, and we know that we're connected because the sort order file doesn't have the sale, but this one does. You can see there's the sale item right there. And it's displaying between home and products just the way we want it to. But remember, we don't want to see this sale yet. We want to hide it. So what I'm going to do is go to my YAML file, and I'm going to create a new data element for each one of my menu items. This is going to say display :true. I want the home page menu item. I also want the about page display :true. I want the products page display :true. And then I don't want the sales page. So display :false. In fact, I'm just going to make sale capital letters like this so we can see it easier. So just by modifying the file and saving it, we can see there's our capital letter sale, but it's still there. Just because we created this display value doesn't necessarily mean Jekyll knows what to do with it. So I'm going to come back here to my page here, and what I'm going to do is modify it so that, remember, we have our assign navs variable and we sort it by the sort order field. Well, let's create one more. So I'm just going to go ahead and press enter and another pipe, and this time I'm going to type where, and I'm going to say display true. Now you'd think you'd type where it equals true, but actually the way that Liquid works is you want to do a comma. So I'll just go ahead and save this, and what should happen down here is the sale item should disappear. So I'm going to save this, and you can see the sale item is gone now. So what we can do, and don't forget about this, is we have these sub items. if we're going to do display colon true on the main items, we should probably do that with our sub items. So we can just do display colon true and display colon true, and then hook that up in our sub items. So we have this sort. I'm going to put that in another line, and I'm going to do the same thing here, where display is true. There. So we're all good now. Now, here's something that we could also take a look at. Let's go ahead and put the sale back. And what I'm going to do is put that at the end. So I'm going to say it's now at the end of our menu item and display colon true. So there's sale. What if about this title with the sub items? Well, all we need to do really is change the title to false for the the about page. I said title. What if we want to display the about page? No, we want to hide the about page and all the sub items. That's what I'm getting at. So we want to hide the about area. So what we can do is come over here to the about and just change the display to false and save that. And you can see all the sub items are not going to display. So that's kind of cool. We don't actually have to go into all of our sub items and also say those should be false in order to not display them. And that's because of the way that we've set up our for loops and our where statements. Thank you for watching this video. If you want more like this, please like, comment, and click the bell to support my channel.